Linda Yueh is a Fellow in Economics at Oxford University, a Professor at the London Business School and a Visiting Professor at Peking University. She's advised the World Bank, the European Commission, the Asian Development Bank and the World Economic Forum in Davos, and she's held non-executive directorships at several major companies. She's a widely published author who's had her own TV shows at Bloomberg and the BBC. With so many different roles, how does she describe herself?
I'm an ABC, so I'm an American-British-Chinese. I'm an American-British dual national, but my family are originally from China. So I'm basically American, but I came to Britain years ago. And I see myself, I think, probably as quite a global citizen as a result. And I've also, I think, been lucky enough where I've been able to do work that allows me to travel around the world. Most academics work pretty much 7 days a week because you never really have downtime. So on the one hand, you control your schedule, which is terrific because you have more freedom than in a lot of employment. But on the other hand, the pressure to produce is considerable. And it's a pretty tough, as I say, environment, given that there's lots of really bright people doing research in similar areas. But I had to say, I think I do it because I enjoy it. I think it's a real privilege to be able to think, write, publish, and share ideas.
You also teach, so what makes a good student?
Hunger. A student who's hungry for knowledge knows why they're there. That makes for a good student. So I think studying is about effort. It's about commitment. It's all the things that you associate with, being studious. But I think the other element of it is being hungry to be there, hungry to improve your own knowledge base, not just there to get through the degree, but actually there because you know why you're there and what you want to get out of a particular lecture or a particular course. So to me, the most inspiring students are the ones who are really hungry and go above and beyond, not because you suggest they should, but because they know why they're there and they know what they're going to do with the knowledge that they gain so that they can go out and change the world.
Where do they get that, do you think? Parenting or the previous schools or the teaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are different studies around this. So there was a study in an American law school which found that the best performing students were the hungriest, and they tended to come from less privileged backgrounds. So perhaps in law school it's about people who, that study suggested it's about people who knew what they needed to get out of their law degree so they can graduate, repay their loans, and and do something with it. I think in general it's a complicated mixture of things. I think probably if you have self-awareness, that helps. So why you're there, because I think oftentimes I've seen students get pushed by parents and sort of has a negative effect on them because expectations are so high, they find it difficult to perform. I've also seen it the other way around where there's not enough expectation put on a student and they feel they can coast. So I think probably, self-awareness, which I increasingly find actually students have. I think there's a greater, search for purpose in what they do, and part of that translates into getting the most out of your education, having a good balance in your life. I think all of those things, but I think to me that's probably the thing, being aware of why you're there and what you can get out of it.
It's interesting that you see a common link, so they come from less privileged backgrounds, suggesting that there's a fear that's driving them, which perhaps the privileged kids don't have.
Yeah, I think there is something there. If you come from a less privileged background, you're going to be, in that law school study, taking on, 6 figures worth of debt. You are going to make sure that you are going to deliver in terms of, the money that's been spent on you by your parents, maybe by your relatives, the loans you're taking out. You're going to make sure that you perform. And I think there is something to that. So I think maybe if there was less financial pressure, maybe that's part of it. But certainly that study, which was quite a big study, which is why I'm citing it, found that people who did well in law school the best predictor was whether they were hungry, not their, not their university marks, not, but actually background in being hungry.
Great amount of satisfaction for you to teach people, particularly those kids that are really driven. What drives you? Is it just the enjoyment of teaching? Just talking about the teaching side?
Yeah, I think I enjoy being around. I think, being around people who enjoy what they do. And students have this, the world is their oyster feeling about them. We talked about maybe they have varying motivations, and which is normal, I think, in any group. But I think I enjoy being able to explain something so that you increase their knowledge. And so to me, there's a real sort of satisfaction in being part of this process of learning and just explaining something and complicated to help it make sense to somebody. I think I enjoy that in terms of teaching. I enjoy that in terms of writing. I enjoy sort of making complicated things clear, because I think that will, especially in my field, economics, because I think that helps them go away and they can make better economic decisions, which affects both their own lives, their employment, and their financial planning for their own lives, but also in terms of public policy. So much public policy is around economics, economic analysis, the financing of it. So I feel like I'm contributing to people making more informed decisions by helping explain concepts. And so I think that's probably the part that I most enjoy. Which
is why you went into journalism, presumably, because you're explaining complicated things to people. Why did you go back to academia after journalism?
Yeah, so I was an academic, and then I became a journalist exactly for that reason. Instead of explaining to a classroom, I was explaining on air. And I think I've gone back because the mix of doing academia and journalism, so being able to do both, is appealing to me, because I've never had sort of one trajectory. I think had I had one trajectory, then perhaps I would have a preference for one or the other. But I actually genuinely enjoy both. And I think I enjoy having a mix of things so that every day is every day is not entirely different, but, different things happen on different days. And I do like that. I think I like the variety. But it is, as you say, it is literally explaining things, which I think in this kind of complicated, economic environment we have at the moment, whether it's trade wars or Brexit or slowing growth or emerging markets, there's just a lot of really interesting economic phenomena around to analyze and then contribute to the discussions around.
But there's so much emotion involved these days as well, which there wasn't before, which is where you often get pulled in, isn't it, to give a pragmatic, scientific almost approach to a story.
Yeah, so I think this is really where my academic background pushes me to be analytical. And I'm naturally quite analytical anyways. I think we are dealing with very emotive issues for a lot of people at the moment. Around different countries have different issues. But, academia is around analysis, examination, argument. The Socratic method is literally arguing different sides of an issue, so you can make judgment at the end about where you come out. So I think my natural approach is very analytical, and economics also lends itself to being analytical. I mean, not always. There are those who are more on one side of the spectrum or another in terms of ideology, but I would say most economists, academic economists, are very evidence-based, and that's essentially where I sit. What is the evidence? How do you interpret it in a way that's consistent with the context, history, and all of that? So it's very analytical and not very emotive.
I'm interested in the idea that you sort of moved into journalism because you almost fancied it, and then you moved back to academia because you felt like going back to academia. You haven't got this massive sort of career plan. You're sort of going with what interests you, and you're nurturing that interest. Is that a correct observation?
Yeah. So I think I've been pretty lucky. So I think I said at the earlier on that I didn't actually plan to be an academic either. So I think I have been. I mean, I genuinely feel very fortunate that I've been able to pursue interests. I mean, I think around my skill set, and be able to do that, I think is very lucky. So I think I'm very analytical. I try to explain things clearly in plain language. It turns out that teaching and broadcasting, those are useful for both of those careers, but maybe in the future, something else, But
it's interesting that you've discovered that, and rather than set yourself a plan, I want to be, professor at Oxford University, you sort of ended up there because you found a job that suits you and matches your skills, and you've learned that over time. But some people who have this plan to be a particular thing, it might not be the right thing for them.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge of our time, isn't it, for a lot of people, which is, do I have a career path, or do I sort of, go with my interests? I suppose for a lot of people, it must be somewhat middle of the road because you have a general idea. So anything I do, I like to do well. So you have a general idea of what you might be able to do well, because obviously it's one thing to follow your interests, but if it turns out, you need to be able to dance or something, and you can't dance, well, it's probably not your career path. So I just suspect a lot of people are probably, like they have an aim, but I think you have to be flexible about it because you just never really know how things might pan out, and actually what opportunities may lie around the corner. Because I think that's one of the other things about life that's, to me, kind of fascinating, which is you try to make sure that you are prepared for a career in whatever it is. You have the skills, you have the training, you have the ambition, but you can't predict what might be around the corner. So are you open, to change? And I increasingly think people are. And one of the reasons for it, actually, is because there's a book called The 100-Year Life, which is written by two academics, actually. And they basically say that people who are born now have a 50% chance of living to their 100, so they're healthy. So if you think about having a 60-year career instead of a 40-year career, you're going to have to be more open because you're not going to do the same thing for 60 years. So I chaired their book launch, and and actually then they did my book in return. And, and I just thought that was one of the fascinating lessons from it. Because my book looks at successful economists, the greatest economists, and that's essentially how their careers were. So they always knew they were going to do economics, but some of them were finance ministers. All of them did a stint in academia. Some of them were investors. Some of them became MPs. And it was just fascinating to me that they found their skills could contribute in a wide range of occupations, probably not planned. And, they've made their mark on history.
You talked about your students' fears that drive them. Is there a fear that drives you? Is there something you worry about if you don't keep up with your career?
Oh, that's a good question.
What drives you?
Yeah. I think probably wanting to feel like I contributed something. So probably I think if I thought that I wasn't adding to knowledge or adding clarity to it, I think I would worry that, what am I doing kind of thing. So I think having a purpose to what you do, creating some value, whatever it is. So I think for me, that's probably what drives me. Oh, and enjoying every day, because I think that's actually really important. You have to enjoy what you do.
Enjoy the journey.
Yeah, you definitely do. Actually, I think if you if you wake up every morning and, you're grateful for what you have and you plan on enjoying the day, I think that's a really good gauge of whether you're doing what you should be doing. So being here today, this is great fun, I'm enjoying it. And so I think that's got to be, a big factor in terms of how you would want to drive your own career. If you wake up every day going to a job and you dread it, that's probably not a good sign.
I think you're scared of being bored as well. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good.
But does that come from, is there anything in your past where did you spend a period where you thought I'd got to contribute more? I mean, where does it come from, do you think?
Yeah. No, I don't mind being bored.
Quite nice, really.
Yeah, it is. A bit relaxing, actually.
But where does that sort of wish to contribute come from, do you think?
Yeah.
Where is that instilled?
I think that's probably why I turned to economics, because I think I felt quite early on I didn't really understand the world around me very well. like, why was it that so few countries are rich and so many countries are not? Why is it that within a country you have such wealth disparities? Why is it some regions are booming and others are not? I just literally felt like I didn't really understand the world around me. And so I turned to economics probably for that reason. And I think that's probably still what motivates me, trying to understand better the world around us and then explaining it so that policymakers and business people can make better decisions around it by seeing it more clearly. So that's probably, I would say, the motivation that I've had in terms of, and I think I started pretty early because I chose economics, even though it was really hard. There's a lot of maths.
Yeah. You're doing a great job, and thank you for explaining everything to us. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Max. You're always so lovely.